Domestic violence is as prevalent today as it ever has been, if not more. Our cities in our world are more advanced, more connected, more technologically available more than ever before. And yet violence is as much or more than it's ever been in the history of mankind. The world that my children know, I could not have fathomed. The world is small. Used to be, St. Louis was a long ways away from me. It's amazing how small the world has become and how much we are aware of global economy and how much we are aware of global connection and how what happens on this side of the hemisphere affects what happens on the other side of the hemisphere. We understand that so much more than we've ever had before. And we still, you know, I watch the commercials where it talks about, you know, you see the gal come in and she's some celebrity, I have no idea who she is, but the class is trying to explain to her about how they're going to China that day because they have a satellite connection with the Chinese classroom in the streaming video right there. You see this? Yes? No? I couldn't have fathomed that 30 years ago if I'd wanted to. And yet, communication is harder amongst people than ever before. Not only is the world smaller, but we are able to technologically communicate more than ever before. You know, whenever Kingston and Alexis hit, you know, both of them were teenage, you know, getting whatever closer, and Kingston was going nuts, and I, you know, so we get the Mike and I were talking about this the other night. We were getting I got the 1,000 text a month plan, thinking, holy guacamole, who in their right mind would text 1,000 times a month? And then I get the bill, and he had texted like 4,000 times or something. And I'm calling him, I'm going, Kingston, there's 30 days in a month. Do you have a clue how many texts that is in a day? No. It's a stinking lot, man. Who are you talking to? I don't know. So as we talk about this, I'm saying I don't call him. Just call him. You know? He's going, no, Dad, you don't understand. I said, please explain. Well, you see, here's how it works, Dad. You see, I can be having a conversation with you and text somebody else at the same time having a separate conversation. I'm saying, so why don't you just call him? Well, because then I'd have to stop the conversation with you. You see, I can talk with you, converse with the texting with somebody else, and not stop the conversation with you. I'm going, what the crazy time? I said, well, the other thing is I don't want you to know when I'm texting her. Oh, so it's about me not knowing what you're saying. Yes, but it's also about how I can have this conversation here and have this conversation here at the same time and keep right on going. And yet, all that, instead of saying, man, we can communicate so much more. Yeah, but you know what? That's twice as much opportunity for misinformation, misunderstanding, and people getting hacked off at each other. Yes, say yes. Yes. The more advanced we get, you would think the more advanced we would become. But no. You see, we're not any more at peace today than we were when the shepherds were out in their fields keeping watch over the flocks. We're not any farther along, and what Paul says here in Philippians chapter 4 is all the more important to us today than it ever was whenever he wrote it to that church in Philippi. Don't be anxious for anything. That can't come across as fly by the seat of your pants and don't give a care to anything, and that's not what he's talking about. He's not talking about don't be concerned. What he is saying is what you want to do is you want to learn to submit to God. This is a submission phrase. This is where he's saying you want to learn how to, instead of being afraid, and instead of being anxious, instead of being scared, you want to learn to not be anxious, but not be worried. You want to learn how you want to turn it over to the Lord. instead of being anxious, in everything, he says, through prayer and petition with thanksgiving, make your request known to God. Now, it's very interesting that he puts prayer and petition, or prayer and supplication, together. Because at first glance it means the same thing, but it doesn't. Prayer is prayer. And it's kind of an overshadowing umbrella phrase where it's just, this is prayer. But then the word supplication talks specifically about something I need help with from God. So, you put it together and Paul is saying, don't be afraid, don't be anxious, don't be worried, don't be scared. Instead, bring your need and what is concerning you and the stuff that is bothering you, and instead of being overwhelmed by it, bring it with thanksgiving to God, realizing A, to be thankful that you can talk to God about it, and B, there's always somebody worse off than you. Yes, no, yes, no. You better believe it. We all know that. What we do is we focus on everybody that's better off than we are, we think. But folks, there's a whole lot of stuff out there to be thankful for as well. We talked about that the other day. I can be thankful for what I got, I can be thankful for what I don't got. Absolutely. With prayer, petition, and thanksgiving, I can come and bring my concerns and my needs and my fears and what I'm looking for help for to God, and understand He'll take care of it, because you get into verse 7. Because whenever I do that, I'm given the promise that I will have peace from God that absolutely transcends understanding. Peace that is above and beyond what I can really possibly hope to explain. It's like, well, what is peace? Well, it's peaceful. What's that like? Well, peaceful. I've either experienced it, or you don't have a clue what I'm saying right now. There's really no in between. Now I want you to catch this verse, this last part of this verse. It's very subtle. Don't miss it. The peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. The phrase, guard your hearts, the word guard is a military word. The Greek word it sounds like great coupon, it's basupa. Basupa. It literally means set a sentry at station and guard against outside force. So whenever I bring my prayer and my petition and my concerns and my fear and my worry, and I bring that to God, what happens, one of the things that takes place is, then God allows me to experience His peace, which transcends everything else, and I then have literally a cause and effect. When I bring this before God, while He's not only going to work with me and take care of it, I have His peace, which transcends understanding, that literally takes up a residence and takes charge, and it becomes a century against the worry and against the fear and against all the other stuff in my life. And it's very interesting because we're talking about peace, and Paul uses a military term to talk about how it's used. That sounds like a contradiction. And yet that's the forcefulness behind the peace. Whenever I recognize and submit to God, when I recognize how to come before Him and submit, then what happens is I have His peace, and it takes up residence where it stands guard against all the other garbage in the world around me, so that I can start feeling His connection, His relationship, His experience, and have that peacefulness inside of me. And the very last words of this verse is, through Jesus Christ. Isaiah prophesied it, Jesus proclaimed it, it was announced the night He was born, and then years later Paul says this all happens, the peace of God all comes through Jesus Christ. Wow. So, the question stands, what are some things that I can do where I can experience the peace of God?